Quadrant 2. The essential focus of the fourth generation of management can be captured in the time management matrix diagram on the next page. Basically, we span time in one of four ways. As you see, the two factors that define an activity are urgent and important. Urgent means it requires immediate attention. It's now. Urgent things act on us. A ringing phone is urgent. Most people can't understand the thought of just allowing the phone to ring. You could spend hours preparing material. You could get all dressed up and travel to person's office to discuss a particular issue. But if the phone were to ring while you were there, it would generally take precedence over your personal visit. If you were to phone someone, there aren't many people who would say, I'll get to you in 15 minutes, you just hold. But those people, but those same people would probably let you wait in an office for at least that long while they completed a telephone conversation with someone else. Urgent matters are usually visible, they press on us, they insist on action, they are often popular with others, they are usually right in front of us, and often they are pleasant, easy, fun to do. But so often they are unimportant. Importance, on the other hand, has to do with results. If something is important, it contributes to your mission, your values, your high priority goals. We react to urgent matters, important matters that are not urgent require more initiative, more proactivity. We must act to seize opportunity to make things happen. If we don't practice habit too, if we don't have a clear idea of what is important of the results we desire in our life, we are easily di- diverted into responding to the urgent. Look for a moment at the four quadrant in the time management matrix. Quadrant one is both urgent and important. It deals with the significant results that require immediate attention. We usually call the activities in quadrant one crisis or problems. We all have some quadrant one activities in our lives, but quadrant one consume many people. They are crisis managers, problem minded people, the deadline driving procedures. As long as you focus on quadrant one, it keeps getting bigger and bigger until it's dominate you. It's like the pounding serve. A huge problem comes and knock you down, and you are wiped out. You struggle back up only to face another one that's knock you down and slams you to the ground. Some people are literally beaten up by the problem all day, every day. The only relief they have is in escaping to the not important, not urgent activities of quadrant 4. So when you look at their total matrix, 90% of their time is quadrant 1 and most of the remaining 10% in quadrant 4, with only negligible attention paid to quadrant 2 and 3. That's how people who manage their lives by crisis life. There are other peoples who spends a great deal of time in urgent but not important quadrant 3 thinking they are in quadrant 1. They spend most of their time reacting to things they are urgent, assuming they are also important. But the reality is that the urgency of these matters is often based on the priorities and expectation of others. People who spend time always exclusively in quadrant 3 and 4 basically lead irresponsible life. Effective people stay out of quadrant 3 and 4 because urgent or not, they aren't important. They also shrink quadrant 1 down to size by spending more time in quadrant 2. Quadrant 2 is the heart of effective personal management. It deals with things that are not urgent but are important. It deals with things like building relationship, writing a personal mission statement, long range planning, exercising, preventive maintenance, preparation, all those things we know we need to do, but somehow seldom get around to. doing because they aren't urgent. The paraphrase Peter Drucker, effective people are not problem minded, they are opportunity minded. They feed opportunities and starve problems. They think preventively. They have genuine quadrant one crisis and emergencies that require their immediate attention, but the number is comparatively small. They keep P and PC in balance by focusing on the important but not the urgent. High leverage capacity building activities of quadrant 2. With the time management matrix in mind, take a moment now and consider how you answer the questions at the beginning of this chapter. What quadrant do they fit in? Are they important? Are they urgent? My guess is that they probably fit into quadrant 2. They are obviously important, deeply important, but not urgent. And because they aren't urgent, you don't do them. Now look again at the nature of those questions. What one thing could you do in your personal and professional life that if you did on a regular basis would make a tremendous positive difference in your life? Current two activities have that kind of impact or effectiveness take the quantum leap when we do them. I asked a similar questions to a group of shopping center manager. If you were to do one thing in your professional work, what you know would have enormously positive effect on the result, what would it be? Their, unam- their unanimous response was to build helpful personal relationship with the tenant, the owner of the store inside the shopping center, which is quadrant 2 activities. We did an analysis of the time they were spending on that activity. It was less than 5%. They had good reason problems one right after another. They had reports to make out, meetings to go to, correspondence to answer, phone calls to make, constant interruption. Quadrant 1 had consumed them. They were spending very little time with the store managers, and the time they did spend was filled with negative energy. The only reason they visited the store managers at all was to enforce the contract, to collect the money, or discuss advertisement or other practices that were out of the harmony with center guidelines or some similar things. The store owners were struggling for survival, let alone prosperity. They had employment problem, cost problem, inventory problem, and a host of other problems. Most of them had no training in management at all. Some were fairly good merchandiser, but they needed help. The tenant didn't even want to see the shopping center owner. They were just one problem to contend with. So the owner decided to proactive. They determined their purpose, their value, their priorities in harmony with those priorities. They decided to spend about one third of their time in helping relationship with the tenant. In working with the organization for about a year and a half, I saw them climb to around 20%, which presented more than a fourfold increase. In addition, they changed their role. They become listener, trainer, consultant to the tenant. Their interchange were filled with positive energy. They the effect was dramatic, profound by focusing on relationship and result rather than time and method. The number went up. The tenant were thrilled with the result created by new ideas and skill, and shopping center managers were more effective and satisfied and increased their list of potential tenant and lease revenue based on increased sales by the tenant store. They were no longer policemen or hovering supervisor, they were problem solver helper. Whether you are a student at the university, a worker in an assembly line, or a homemaker, fashion designer, or president of a company, I believe that if you were to ask what lies in quadrant 2 and cultivate the proactivity to go after it, you would find the same result. Your effectiveness would increase dramatically, your crises and problems would shrink to manageable proportion because you would be thinking ahead, working on the roots, doing the preventive things that keep situation from developing into crisis in the first place. In the time management jargon, this is called the Pareto principle. 80% of the results flow out of 20% of the activities. What it takes to say no. The only place to get time for quadrant 2 in the beginning is from quadrant 3 and 4. You can't ignore the urgent important activities of quadrant 1, although it will shrink in size as you spend more time with prevention and preparation in quadrant 2. But the initial time for quadrant 2 has come out of 3 and 4. We have to be proactive to work on quadrant 2 because quadrant 1 and quadrant 3 work on you. To say yes to important quadrant 2 priorities, you have to learn to say no to other activities, sometimes apparently urgent things. Some times ago, my wife was invited to serve a chairman of a committee in a community endeavor. She had a number of truly important things she was trying to work on, and she really didn't want to do it, but she felt pressured into it and finally agreed. What it take what it take to say no. The only place to get time for quadrant 2 in the beginning is from quadrant 3 and 4. You can't ignore the urgent and important activities of quadrant 1, although it will shrink in size as you spend more time with prevention and preparation in quadrant 2. But the initial time for quadrant 2 has come out of 3 and 4. You have to be proactive to work on quadrant 2 because quadrant 1 and 3 work on you. To say yes to important quadrant 2 priorities, you have to learn to say no to other activities, sometimes apparently urgent things. Some time ago, my wife was invited to serve as a chairman of community in a community endeavor. She had a number of truly important things she was trying to work on, and she really didn't want to do it. But she felt pressure into it and finally agreed. Then she called one of her dear friends to ask if she could serve on her committee. Her friend listened for a long time and then said, Sandra, that sounds like a wonderful project, a really worthy undertaking. I appreciate so much your inviting me to be a part of it. I feel honored by it for a number of reasons. I won't be participating myself, but I want you to know how much I appreciate your invitation. Sandra was ready for anything but a pleasant no. She turned to me and seek. I wish I said that. I don't mean to imply that you shouldn't be involved in significant service projects. Those things are important, but you have to decide what your highest priorities are and have the courage, pleasantly smiling and non apologetic to say no to other things, and the way you do that is by having a bigger yes burning inside. The enemy of the best is often the good. Keep in mind that you are always saying no to something if it isn't to the apparent urgent things in your life. It is probably to more fundamental, highly important things, even when the urgent is good. The the good can keep you from your best, keep you from your unique contribution if you let it. When I was director of university relationship at a large university, I hired a very talented, proactive, creative writer. One day after he had been on the job for a few months, I went into his office and asked him to work on some urgent matters that were pressing on me. He said, Stephen, I'll do whatever you want me to do. Just let me share with you my situation. Then he took me over to his wallboard where he had listened over 2 dozen projects he has working on together with performance criteria and deadline dates that had been clearly negotiated before. He was highly disciplined, which is why I want to see him in the first place. If you want to get something done, give it to a busy man. Then he said, Stephen, to do the jobs that you want to done right would take several days. Which of these projects would you like me to delay or cancel to satisfy your request? Well, I didn't want to take the responsibility for that. I didn't want to put a cog in the wheel for one of the most productive people on the staff just because I happened to be managing by crisis at the time. The job I wanted done were urgent but not important, so I went and found another crisis manager and gave the job to him. We say yes or no to things daily, usually many times a day. A center of correct results and a focus on our personal mission and empower us with wisdom to make those judgment effectively. As I work with different groups, I tell them that the essence of effective time and life management is to organize and execute around balance priorities. That I ask these questions: if you were to fault yourself in one of three areas, which would it be? Number one, the inability to prioritize. Number two, the inability or desire to organize around the priorities. And number three, the lack of discipline to execute around them to stay with your priorities and organization. Most people say their main fault is a lack of discipline. On deeper thought, I believe that is not the case. The basic problem is that their priorities have not become deeply planted in their hearts and minds. They haven't really internalized habit too. There are many people who recognize the value of quadrant 2 activities in their life, whether they identify them as such or not, and they attempt to give priorities to those activities and integrate them into their lives through self-discipline alone. But without a principle center and a personal mission statement, they don't have the necessary foundation to sustain their efforts. They are working on the leaves, on the attitude and behavior of disciplines without even thinking to examine the root, the basic paradigms from which their natural attitude and behavior flow. A quadrant 2 focus is a paradigm that grew out of a principal center. If you are centered on your spouse, your money, your friends, your pleasure, or any extrinsic factor, you will keep getting thrown back into quadrant 1 and 3. Reacting to the outside forces your life is centered on. Even if you are centered on yourself, you will end up in 1 and 2, reacting to the impulse of the movement. Your independent will alone cannot effectively discipline your against your center. In the other, in the words of the architectural maxim from flow functions, likewise, management flow leadership, the way you spend your time is a result of the way you see your time and the way you really see your priorities. If your priorities grow out of a principal center and a personal mission, if they are deeply planted in your heart and in your mind, and you will see quadrant 2 as a natural exciting place to invest your time. It almost possible to say no to the popularity of the quadrant 3 or to the pleasure of escape to quadrant 4. If you don't have a bigger yes burning inside, yes, only when you have the self-awareness to examine your program and the imagination and the conscience to create a new unique principal center program to which you can say yes. Only then will you have the sufficient independent willpower to say no with a genuine smile to the unimportant.